Unexpected encounter. The crimson sky of Novaterra burned with the fires of war. Lieutenant Ethan Reeves crouched behind the twisted wreckage of what had once been a colonial outpost, his pulse rifle clutched tightly against his chest. The acrid smell of ozone and burning metal filled his nostrils, a grim reminder of the battle that had raged here mere hours ago. Ethan's mission was clear: sweep the area for any remaining Coraxian forces and secure the outpost for human reoccupation. The Coraxians, a warrior race from a distant star system, had been pushing against humanity's expansion for years. Their ferocity in battle was legendary, matched only by their unwavering belief in their own superiority. As Ethan moved silently through the ruins, his enhanced combat suit's sensors swept the area, searching for any signs of life. The suit's eye whispered in his ear, "Movement detected, 50 meters northeast. Biological signature matches Coraxian physiology." Ethan's heart rate spiked. He had faced Coraxians before, but never alone. Their strength and speed made them formidable opponents, even for a trained soldier in a combat suit. He moved cautiously, using the debris for cover as he approached the source of the movement. As he rounded a corner, he saw her, a Coraxian warrior, her silver-blue skin gleaming in the dim light, lay half-buried under a fallen support beam. Her breathing was labored, and a dark purple fluid, Coraxian blood, pooled beneath her. Ethan raised his rifle, years of training taking over. But as his finger tensed on the trigger, the Coraxian's eyes snapped open. They were a startling shade of gold, filled with pain and something else. Fear, defiance. "Do it, human," she snarled, her voice a mix of growl and hiss. "Finish what your kind started." Ethan hesitated. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Coraxians never surrendered, never showed weakness. They fought to the bitter end, taking as many humans with them as possible. But this one, she was injured, trapped. Killing her would be easy. The right thing to do, according to his superiors. And yet, lowering his rifle, Ethan took a step closer. "I'm not here to kill you," he said, surprising himself with the words. The Coraxian's eyes widened, then narrowed suspiciously. "Lies," she spat. "All humans are killers. Destroyers." Ethan shook his head. "Not all of us. Not today." He knelt beside her, his suit's medical scanners already assessing her injuries. "I'm going to help you. Try not to move." As he began to lift the beam off her, the Coraxian watched him with a mixture of confusion and wariness. "Why?" she asked, her voice softer now, laced with genuine curiosity. Ethan grunted with effort as he shifted the heavy beam. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. "Because maybe if we stop seeing each other as enemies, we can find a better way." The beam finally moved, and the Coraxian gasped in pain as pressure was relieved from her crushed leg. Ethan quickly applied a nanogel to stop the bleeding, his medic training taking over. "I am Zerak," the Coraxian said suddenly, her golden eyes fixed on Ethan's face, "warrior of the Third Claw." "And you, human?" "Lieutenant Ethan Reeves, Earth Defense Force," he replied, focusing on treating her wounds. "But right now, I'm just someone trying to help." As Ethan worked, a distant explosion rocked the ground. Both human and Coraxian tensed, eyes darting to the horizon where new plumes of smoke rose. "The battle's not over," Zorak said grimly. "Your people or mine will be here soon. And when they come..." She left the sentence unfinished, but the implication was clear. Neither side would look kindly on this unexpected alliance. Ethan made a quick decision. "Then we need to move. Can you walk?" Zerak tested her newly treated leg, wincing. "I can fight," she said with determination. "That's not what I asked," Ethan replied, a hint of a smile on his face. "But I'll take it. Come on. I know a place we might be safe, at least until we figure out our next move." As he helped Zorak to her feet, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. He had been taught that the Coraxians were the enemy, a threat to be eliminated. But looking at Zerak now, He saw not an alien menace, but a person. Different, yes, but with fears and hopes not so unlike his own. Together, human and Caraxian set off through the ruins, an unlikely pair united by circumstance and a shared desire for survival. Neither knew what challenges lay ahead, but both sensed that this moment, this choice, might be the first step towards something greater than themselves. As they disappeared into the shadows of Novaterra's war-torn landscape, the burning sky above seemed to dim just a little, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would unfold from this unexpected encounter. Uneasy alliance. The twin moons of Novaterra cast an eerie glow over the desolate landscape as Ethan and Zerak made their way through the twisted metal and shattered concrete of what had once been a thriving human colony. The unlikely pair moved in tense silence, each hyper-aware of the other's presence. Ethan led the way, his combat suit's enhanced sensors scanning for threats. Zerak limped behind him, her pride refusing to let her accept more help than absolutely necessary. The Caraxian warrior's golden eyes darted from shadow to shadow, her instincts honed by years of combat screaming at her to be ready for betrayal at any moment. "We're approaching a secure bunker," Ethan said, breaking the silence. "It was designed to withstand orbital bombardment. If it's still intact, we should be safe there for a while." Zerak's mandibles clicked in what Ethan was beginning to recognize as a sign of skepticism. "And what then, human? Do you expect me to become your prisoner?" Ethan stopped and turned to face her. "No," he said firmly. "You're not my prisoner. We're in this together now, whether we like it or not." The Caraxian studied him for a long moment, her alien features unreadable. Finally, she nodded. "Very well. Lead on." As they approached the bunker, a low rumble filled the air. Ethan's suit eye chirped a warning. Multiple aircraft detected. Signatures match Caraxian assault shuttles. Zerak's head snapped up, her eyes widening. "The swarm," she hissed. "They're coming to finish what they started." Ethan grabbed her arm, urging her forward. "We need to move. Now." They sprinted the last 100 meters to the bunker, Zerak pushing through the pain of her injured leg. Ethan's fingers flew over the access panel, inputting codes and praying that the system was still operational. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, with a groan of protesting metal, the heavy blast doors began to slide open. "Get inside," Ethan shouted, practically shoving Zerak through the opening. He dove in after her just as the first Caraxian shuttle screamed overhead. The doors slammed shut behind them, plunging them into darkness. Emergency lights flickered to life, revealing a sparse but well-equipped interior. Ethan moved quickly, activating systems and checking supplies. Zerak stood near the entrance, her posture tense, ready for action. "Your wound needs attention," Ethan said, gesturing to a nearby med station. The Nado gel was just a temporary fix. Zerak hesitated, then moved to the station. As she allowed the automated system to treat her leg, she watched Ethan work. "You are not what I expected," she said slowly. Ethan glanced up from the control panel he was studying. "What did you expect?" "A savage," Zerak replied bluntly. "A brute with no honor, no compassion. That is what we are taught about humans." "And what do you think now?" Ethan asked, genuinely curious. Zerak's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "I am uncertain. You spared my life when you had no reason to. You risked yourself to bring me here. These are not the actions of a savage." Ethan nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Maybe we're not so different after all. As if to punctuate his words, a distant explosion rocked the bunker. Ethan's smile faded as he turned back to the monitors. "Looks like your people are giving mine hell out there." Zerak moved to stand beside him, her eyes scanning the tactical displays. "The swarm fights without mercy," she said, a note of pride in her voice. Then, softer, "But perhaps that is not always the best way." Ethan looked at her in surprise. That's not something I expected to hear from a correction warrior. Zarek's golden eyes met his, and I did not expect to be saved by a human soldier. Yet here we are. The moment was interrupted by a harsh beeping from one of the consoles. Ethan's hands flew over the controls, his expression growing grim. We've got a problem. The bunker's life support systems are damaged. We've got maybe 48 hours of air left. Zarek's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sound Ethan was beginning to associate with agitation. So we are trapped here, to suffocate slowly while our forces destroy each other above. Ethan shook his head. No. There's a maintenance tunnel that leads to the surface, but it's going to take us right into the middle of the battle zone. Then we fight, Zarek said firmly. Side by side, if necessary. Ethan raised an eyebrow. You'd fight alongside a human. Zarek straightened, her warrior's pride evident in every line of her body. You saved my life, Ethan Reeves. I owe you a debt, and a correction always pays their debts. For a moment, Ethan was speechless. Then he nodded, a new respect in his eyes. All right then. We got some time before we need to move. Let's use it to plan, and to learn what we can about each other. If we're going to survive this, we need to understand one another better. As they settled in to strategize, both human and correction felt a shift in the air between them. The initial wariness was still there, but alongside it grew something new. A tentative trust, born of shared danger and unexpected kindness. Outside, the battle for Novaterra raged on, but within the confines of the bunker, a smaller, quieter, yet no less significant battle was being fought. The battle against prejudice, against ingrained hatred, against the very notion that their two species could never coexist. As Ethan and Zarek talked, sharing stories of their lives and their worlds, they began to see each other not as alien creatures, but as people. Different, yes, but with hopes, fears, and dreams that weren't so dissimilar after all. And as the hours ticked by, bringing them closer to their desperate dash for survival, a seed of something greater took root, a realization that perhaps the key to ending this war lay not in weapons or tactics, but in understanding. In seeing the enemy not as a faceless threat, but as individuals capable of compassion, of change, of growth. It was a fragile hope, as delicate as a flower blooming in the midst of a battlefield. But it was there, growing stronger with each passing moment. And as Ethan and Zarek prepared for the challenges ahead, they carried that hope with them, a small light in the darkness of war. Journey through hostile territory. The maintenance tunnel stretched before Ethan and Zarek like the gullet of some vast mechanical beast. Emergency lights cast a sickly glow over the rusted metal walls, flickering ominously as distant explosions rocked the structure. The unlikely pair stood at the entrance, each acutely aware that their next steps would take them into a war zone where both their peoples would see them as enemies. Ready? Ethan asked, his voice muffled by the helmet of his combat suit. Zarek's mandibles clicked once, decisively. Always, she replied, hefting the human weapon Ethan had provided her from the bunker's armory. It felt strange in her hands, so different from the biomechanical arms of her people, but she adapted quickly. Survival demanded it. They moved into the tunnel, Ethan taking point with Zarek covering their rear. The correction warrior marveled silently at how naturally they fell into this formation, as if they had fought side by side for years rather than hours. As they progressed, the sounds of battle grew louder. The tunnel began to slope upward, and soon they could see a patch of Novaterra's blood-red sky through a grating above. "This is it," Ethan whispered, his hand hovering over the release mechanism. "Once we're out there, we're in no man's land. Both sides will be gunning for us." Zarek placed a clawed hand on his shoulder, the gesture surprisingly gentle. "Then we shall give them a battle to remember, human." Ethan couldn't help but grin behind his faceplate. "Damn right we will." With a hiss of hydraulics, the grating slid open. They emerged into chaos. The sky was alive with crisscrossing energy beams and missile contrails. Human dropships dueled with Coraxian assault craft, while on the ground, mech suits clashed with bio-armored Coraxian shock troops. The very air seemed to vibrate with the cacophony of war. "We need to reach the mountains," Ethan shouted over the din, pointing to a distant range of jagged peaks. "There's a hidden Earth force base there. If we can make it, we might be able to stop this madness." Zarak nodded, her golden eyes scanning the battlefield. "The direct path is suicide. We must use the ruins for cover." They set off at a sprint, weaving through the shattered remnants of the colony. Every few meters they were forced to take cover as stray fire or the attention of a combatant threatened to end their journey prematurely. As they crouched behind the burned-out husk of a transport vehicle, a human squad stumbled upon them. For a heartbeat, time seemed to freeze as the soldiers registered the sight of a human in a combat suit alongside a Coraxian warrior. "Lieutenant," one of the soldiers asked, confusion evident in his voice. "What the hell?" "Stand down," Ethan barked, using every ounce of command presence he possessed. "This is a top-secret op. The Coraxian is with me." The soldiers hesitated, their weapons still raised. Zarak tensed beside Ethan, ready for a fight. "But sir," another soldier began, "our orders." "Your orders," Ethan cut him off, "are to fall back and regroup at Sector 7. We'll handle things here." For a moment, it could have gone either way. Then, slowly, the squad leader lowered his weapon. "Yes, sir. Good hunting." With a gesture to his team, they melted back into the ruins. Zarak let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Impressive," she said. "I did not think they would obey so easily." Ethan shook his head. "They shouldn't have. We got lucky. Come on, we need to move before they start asking questions." They pressed on, the mountains growing incrementally larger with each harrowing dash between cover. As they approached the outskirts of the ruined colony, a new sound cut through the chaos of battle, a high-pitched keening that set Ethan's teeth on edge. Zarak's eyes widened in recognition. "Void stalkers," she hissed. "Ethan, we must find cover. Now." No sooner had the words left her mouth than the air above them shimmered. 3 Coraxian craft materialized, their organic hulls writhing as adaptive camouflage shifted to reveal wickedly barbed weapons pods. "Run," Ethan yelled, grabbing Zarak's arm and pulling her toward a half-collapsed building. They dove through a shattered window just as the Void Stalkers opened fire. The ground behind them erupted in a series of explosions, showering them with debris. The building groaned ominously, threatening to come down around them. Zarak rolled to her feet, her alien features set in grim determination. "We cannot stay here," she said, helping Ethan up. "The stalkers will bring this structure down upon us." Ethan nodded, his mind racing. "There," he said, pointing to a nearby maintenance hatch. "The old sewers. It's not pretty, but it might get us past the stalkers." They pried open the hatch and dropped into the dank tunnels below just as another barrage from the Void Stalkers reduced their shelter to rubble. The stench was overwhelming, but it was preferable to being vaporized. As they sloshed through the murky water, guided by Ethan's suit lights, Zarak spoke. "You could have left me," she said quietly. "When those human soldiers appeared, it would have been easier." Ethan glanced back at her, his expression hidden behind his faceplate, but his voice warm. "Not a chance. We're in this together, remember." Zarak was silent for a moment. Then, so softly Ethan almost missed it, she said, "Thank you." They continued on in companionable silence, each lost in thought. The sounds of battle above were muffled now, a distant reminder of the conflict that raged on without them. After what felt like hours of navigating the labyrinthine tunnels, they emerged on the lower slopes of the mountain range. The air was clearer here, the sounds of war more distant. But they knew the respite was temporary. As they paused to get their bearings, Zarak turned to Ethan. "This base of yours," she said, "what do you hope to achieve there?" Ethan took a deep breath. "There's something both our sides need to know." something that could change everything. But we have to make it there first. Zerak studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Then let us make haste. Our journey is far from over, and I sense that time grows short. Together, they began the arduous climb up the mountain, leaving the battlefield behind, but carrying with them the weight of their newfound alliance and the hope for a future neither had dared imagine before. As they ascended, the red sky of Novaterra seemed to darken, as if the planet itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would come of this unprecedented partnership between human and Coraxian. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance, resting on the shoulders of two individuals who had chosen understanding over hatred, cooperation over conflict. The mountain loomed before them, its peak shrouded in mist. Somewhere up there lay answers, and perhaps a chance to end the war. But the path was treacherous, and they knew that the greatest challenges still lay ahead. Revelations and sacrifices. The mountain air bit into Ethan's exposed skin as he and Zerak picked their way across a narrow ledge. His combat suit, designed for the battlefields below, struggled to compensate for the rapidly dropping temperature. Beside him, Zerak moved with a fluid grace that belied her alien physiology, her golden eyes constantly scanning for danger. "We're close," Ethan said, his breath fogging in the thin air. "The base entrance should be just around this bend." Zerak nodded, her mandibles clicking softly. "I sense no immediate threats, but we must remain cautious. Your people may not be as understanding as you." Ethan couldn't argue with that. The alliance they'd forged was unprecedented, fragile. One wrong move could shatter it, and with it, their hopes for peace. As they rounded the bend, a sheer rock face greeted them. To the untrained eye, it appeared no different from the rest of the mountainside. But Ethan knew better. He approached a seemingly random outcropping and placed his hand on its surface. A soft blue light pulsed beneath his palm. DNA and biometric scan complete. "Welcome, Lieutenant Reeves," a disembodied voice announced. A section of the rock face shimmered and disappeared, revealing a sleek metal door. Zerak's eyes widened slightly, impressed despite herself. "Clever," she murmured. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and they stepped into a brightly lit corridor. Ethan tensed, expecting an armed reception committee. Instead, they were met with an eerie silence. "Something's wrong," he muttered, drawing his weapon. "There should be guards, technicians, someone." They moved cautiously through the facility, every empty room and silent corridor ratcheting up the tension. Finally, they'd reached the central command center. The door was ajar, and a faint, flickering light spilled out. Ethan pushed the door open, his weapon at the ready. What he saw made his blood run cold. The command center was a scene of carnage. Bodies of Earth Force personnel lay strewn about, their faces frozen in expressions of shock and pain. Holographic displays flickered, showing chaotic battle data. And in the center of it all, hunched over a console, was a figure Ethan recognized. General Hawthorne. He called out, disbelief coloring his voice. The figure straightened and turned. General Adelaide Hawthorne, decorated war hero and Ethan's commanding officer, regarded them with cold eyes. Blood, some of it human, some alien, stained her uniform. "Lieutenant Reeves," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "I see the reports of your defection were not exaggerated." Her gaze shifted to Zerak, and a look of disgust crossed her face. "Consorting with the enemy. I expected better of you." Ethan's mind raced. "General, what happened here? Where is everyone?" Hawthorne's laugh was bitter. "Where they needed to be. Dead. Along with the truth." Zerak tensed beside Ethan, her claws flexing. "What truth, human?" she demanded. The general's eyes glittered dangerously. "The truth that this war, this entire conflict, is based on a lie." Ethan felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. "What are you talking about?" Hawthorne gestured to the flickering displays. "6 years ago, When we first encountered the corrections, it wasn't the unprovoked attack we reported. We fired first, destroyed a peaceful expedition, and then we covered it up, painted the corrections as bloodthirsty invaders to justify our expansion. Zarek hissed, her entire body coiling with rage. You slaughtered innocents. Started a war that has cost millions of lives on both sides. We did what was necessary, Hawthorne snapped. Humanity needs room to grow, resources to exploit. The corrections were in our way. Ethan's hand tightened on his weapon. So all of this, all the death, the destruction, it was for nothing. Hawthorne's face hardened. It was for the survival of our species, Lieutenant. A concept you seem to have forgotten. She drew her own weapon, a sleek pistol that hummed with barely contained energy. I can't let this information leave this room. The war must continue. It's the only way to ensure humanity's dominance. Time seemed to slow. Ethan saw Hawthorne's finger tighten on the trigger, saw the muzzle of her weapon align with Zarak's head. Without thinking, he threw himself sideways, colliding with the correction warrior just as a bolt of searing energy cut through the air where she had been standing. They crashed to the floor, alarms blaring around them. Zarak recovered first, returning fire with her borrowed human weapon. Hawthorne dove behind a console, energy bolts sizzling past her. Ethan, Zarak called out. The data. We must secure it. Understanding flashed through Ethan's mind. If they could get proof of this deception off-world, to both human and Correxian authorities, they might have a chance to end the war. He scrambled towards the central console, fingers flying over the controls. A progress bar appeared on the screen, data uploading to the facility's long-range transmitter. Hawthorne saw what he was doing and snarled, abandoning her cover to charge towards him. Zarek intercepted her, the two women colliding in a flurry of blows. Human martial arts clashed against Correxian combat techniques in a deadly dance. The upload was at 60% when the facility shook violently. Warning klaxons screamed to life. Self-destruct sequence initiated. An automated voice announced, 5 minutes to detonation. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. Zarak, we need to go. Now. The Correxian warrior disengaged from Hawthorne, landing a vicious blow that sent the general staggering back. She retreated to Ethan's side, her golden eyes blazing with determination. Is it done? She asked. Ethan checked the console. 98%, 99%, 100%. It's done. The truth is out there now. Ethan checked the console. 98%, 99%, 100%. It's done. The truth is out there now. Hawthorne, blood streaming from a gash on her forehead, laughed bitterly. It doesn't matter. You'll never make it out of here alive. And without you to corroborate the data, it'll be dismissed as a hoax, a Correxian trick. The facility shook again, more violently this time. Pieces of the ceiling began to fall. Ethan met Zarak's gaze, saw his own resolve mirrored in her alien features. We're not done yet, he said, both to Hawthorne and to himself. They turned and ran, leaving the wounded general behind. The corridors of the base had become a maze of falling debris and electrical fires. They dodged and weaved, Ethan's combat suit providing a map of the fastest route to the surface. 2 minutes to detonation. The automated voice reminded them, maddeningly calm. They burst out of the hidden entrance, the cold mountain air a shock after the heat of the burning facility. Without pausing, they began to descend, half running, half sliding down the treacherous slope. Behind them, the mountain rumbled ominously. Ethan risked a glance back and saw the peak beginning to collapse in on itself as the base's self-destruct sequence reached its climax. We're not going to make it, he realized, his voice tight with fear and regret. Zarak grabbed his arm, her strength surprising him. We will, she said fiercely. Together. As the mountain exploded above them, human and Correxian clung to each other, two beings united in the face of annihilation. The shockwave hit them like a physical blow. sending them tumbling down the mountainside in a maelstrom of rock and debris. Ethan's last conscious thought was of Zarak, of the unlikely bond they'd forged, and of the hope that their sacrifice might not be in vain. Then darkness claimed him, and the fate of two worlds hung in the balance, waiting to see what would rise from the ashes of truth revealed. A new understanding. Consciousness returned to Ethan in waves, each bringing with it a fresh surge of pain. He blinked, his vision slowly focusing on a ceiling of rough-hewn stone. This wasn't the mountain slope where he'd expected to die. It wasn't anywhere he recognized. "He wakes," a familiar voice said, tinged with relief. Ethan turned his head, wincing at the movement, to see Zarak sitting beside him. The Caraxian warrior looked battered, her silver-blue skin marred by cuts and bruises, but very much alive. "Where?" Ethan began, his voice a rasp. "Safe," Zarak assured him, "or as safe as we can be, given the circumstances." As Ethan's senses returned, he became aware of others in the room. Humans and Caraxians, standing together without hostility. It was a sight so unexpected, so contrary to everything he'd known, that for a moment he wondered if he was hallucinating. A human woman stepped forward, her uniform marking her as a high-ranking officer. "Lieutenant Reeves," she said, her voice carrying the weight of authority. "I'm Admiral Chen of the Earth Defense Force. You've caused quite a stir." Ethan struggled to sit up, Zarak moving to assist him. "The data," he said urgently. "Did it get through?" Admiral Chen's expression was grim but not unkind. "It did. To both human and Caraxian high commands, the revelations have shaken things up, to put it mildly." A Caraxian male, his carapace bearing the intricate patterns of a clan leader, spoke next. "I am Vorax, elder of the Seventh Claw. Your actions have forced both our peoples to confront uncomfortable truths." Ethan's mind reeled. Then the war is not over, Admiral Chen said, "but it has changed. A ceasefire has been called while both sides verify the information you uncovered." Vorax clicked his mandibles, a sound Ethan now recognized as thoughtful consideration. "There are those on both sides who would prefer to continue the conflict, but your actions, and the bond you have formed with Zarak, have opened a door we cannot easily close." Ethan looked at Zarak, saw the same mix of hope and uncertainty he felt reflected in her golden eyes. "What happens now?" he asked. Admiral Chen sighed, suddenly looking very tired. "Now comes the hard part. Diplomacy. Reconciliation. Trying to build trust between two species that have only known each other through the lens of war. It will not be easy," Vorax added. "Generations of hatred and fear cannot be undone in a day, but it is a start." Zarak spoke up, her voice strong despite her injuries. "We have seen what can happen when we choose understanding over conflict. Ethan and I were enemies, and now—" She trailed off, seemingly at a loss for words to describe what they had become. "Now you're a symbol," Admiral Chen finished for her. "A living example of what's possible if we set aside our preconceptions and work together." Ethan felt the weight of expectation settling on his shoulders. "And if we can't? If there are too many like Hawthorne, on both sides, who'd rather keep fighting?" Vorax's expression hardened. "Then we must be louder than they are. We must show our people that there is another way." A commotion at the entrance to the cave drew everyone's attention. A young human soldier burst in, breathing heavily. "Admiral, we've got incoming." Multiple ships, both human and Caraxian. The cave erupted into a flurry of activity. Weapons were drawn, positions taken up. For a moment, it seemed as though the fragile peace would shatter. Then Ethan struggled to his feet, Zarak rising beside him. "No," he said, his voice carrying despite its weakness. "This isn't how it ends. Not after everything we've been through." He looked at Admiral Chen, then at Vorax. "You said we're a symbol. Then let's use that. Let's show them what's possible." Understanding dawned in their eyes. Admiral Chen nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "It's crazy," she said. It might just work. Minutes later, as the ships descended from the blood-red sky of Novaterra, they were met with an unprecedented sight. Human and Coraxian, standing side by side, weapons lowered. And at the forefront, supported by each other, stood Ethan and Zarak. The ships landed, ramps extended. Soldiers from both sides emerged, tense and uncertain. For a heartbeat, the future balanced on a knife's edge. Then Ethan spoke, his voice carrying across the sudden silence. "Look around you," he called out. "Look at who stands beside you. We've been fighting for so long, we've forgotten how to do anything else. But today, we choose something different. Today, we choose understanding." Zarak's voice joined his strong and clear. "We are not so different, your people and mine. We have both blood, both suffered, but we have also shown compassion, demonstrated honor. It is time to build on those qualities, not destroy them." A murmur ran through the assembled forces. Slowly, weapons lowered. Tentative glances were exchanged between longtime enemies, seeing each other clearly perhaps for the first time. Admiral Chen stepped forward. "We have a chance here," she said. "A chance to end this war, to forge a new path. It won't be easy. There will be setbacks, disagreements. But look at what we've achieved already in just these few moments. Imagine what we could do with years of peace, of cooperation." Vorax joined her, his imposing presence a stark contrast to the Admiral's smaller frame. Yet they stood as equals, united in purpose. "The journey ahead is long," he intoned, "but it is one we must take together, for the sake of both our peoples." As the sun began to set on Novaterra, casting long shadows across the gathering, something shifted in the air. It was subtle at first, a softening of postures, a lowering of guards. Then, hesitantly, a human soldier stepped forward, extending a hand to a nearby Coraxian. After a moment's pause, the Coraxian took it. The gesture spread like wildfire. Soon, the clearing was filled with humans and Coraxians, not embracing as friends, that would take time, but acknowledging each other as fellow beings worthy of respect and understanding. Ethan and Zarak watched it unfold, leaning on each other for support, both physical and emotional. "Do you think it will last?" Ethan asked softly. Zarak's mandibles clicked in what Ethan now recognized as a smile. "I do not know," she admitted, "but I know that we will fight for it, as hard as we once fought against each other." As night fell on Novaterra, the planet that had seen so much bloodshed now bore witness to the first fragile steps toward peace. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but for the first time in years, there was hope. Ethan looked up at the stars, visible now through breaks in the clouds. Somewhere out there were Earth and the Coraxian homeworld, two planets whose fates had been inexorably linked by war and were now bound together by the promise of peace. "Whatever comes next," he said, feeling Zarak's presence beside him, steady and reassuring, "we face it together." And in that moment, as human and Coraxian stood united under an alien sky, the universe itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what this unlikely alliance might achieve. The end was just the beginning.